You're watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
Welcome back to the program. Joining me now, Dr. John Davis. He is the author of a new book called Blue to Red. He's also the executive director of the Pryor Center for Arkansas Oral and Visual History. Did I get all that right?
You did.
That is one of the longest titles in the state.
It is. Technically, it's the David and Barbara Pryor Center for Arkansas Oral and Visual History.
Yes, for those who don't know who the Pryors are, of course. Welcome to the program. Good to have you with us.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. I don't get political scientists on often enough. So I get all of these pundits all the time, and it's always good to get somebody that actually knows their stuff, you know. So.
Oh, well, I'll do my best. I think you overpromised there.
Let's talk about the book first. Kind of what was the inspiration? This book looks back at about the last 15 years, specifically in Arkansas, in terms of the rise of the Republican red wave that swept the Democrats out of office back from about 2010 to 2014. Lots more to it than that, but where was the inspiration for you to write this book? What got you interested in this?
First and foremost, I'm an Arkansas native. I've long been a political follower of Arkansas history and politics, and as you know, we were a strong one-party state from the Reconstruction era to very recently, really the previous decade, and then we flopped to being a solid Republican one-party state. And as a political scientist, I knew we had a lot of great research on the topic, particularly before the Republican gains were made. A long history of good scholarship had been done, and I wanted to build off of what had already been accomplished by a lot of wonderful historians and political scientists and try to help explain what had happened over the last decade or so. And
well, we're going to give you a chance to explain that. So, but one of the great things about this is that you were able to interview people that it's still pretty top of mind for them. I mean, you interviewed the head of the Republican Party, you interviewed some political scientists, some people like myself that were covering all of this stuff in real time and seeing it happen. Kind of what was the benefit of having all of that really first resource experience?
I don't think you can beat the firsthand accounts of something like this. And these were all people, including yourself, who have their unique perspectives, and they're able to back that up with a unique flavor of knowledge, right? Either as a member of a journalist, media, political officials, public officials, party activists. We tried to cover the gambit, and I was so fortunate to have people like yourself who'd sit down and talk.
Well, I wasn't fishing for a compliment, but I appreciate that. All right, let's talk about why you think the Republicans made the gains that they did in that short window of time. Really, 3 election cycles saw the entire thing flip: 2010, 2012, 2014. The rest of the South had already been moving in that direction. Why was Arkansas slow to do that?
I think in short, Arkansas was slow because our demographics don't really add up to a lot of other southern states. So a lot of the shifts immediately after the civil rights era that occurred, where we started to see more white conservative voters feel sort of alienated from the Democratic Party and slowly gravitating to the Republican Party in the 60s, 70s, 80s in most southern states. Arkansas didn't really see that. And we had some big political hitters, if you will, in Arkansas. We had Dale Bumpers, David Pryor, and Bill Clinton, probably the 3 most effective political figures who could explain and sort of characterize the Democratic Party in their own terms, in very Arkansas-centric terms. So Arkansas voters continued to remain loyal to the Democratic Party, to Bumpers, Pryor, Clinton, and others, Mike Beebe and others, because they were able to articulate a different brand of Democratic Party that was different from the national flavor. That was a brand that large numbers of Arkansas voters had already rejected beginning in the 70s.
Yeah.
Unless you were a southern, more middle-of-the-road Democratic presidential candidate like a Carter or a Clinton, Arkansas wasn't voting for you anymore. And so we were split-ticket voters for a long time. We were voting for a Republican at the top of the ticket, and then we were still loyal to these uniquely gifted, charismatic figures who were able to sort of rebrand their party.
Yeah. And then it switched in 2010. President Obama's first midterm election, lots of things swirling from the Tea Party to the rise really of Fox News becoming much more dominant. What do you think really finally made everything kind of flip? What was the catalyst, do you think?
I think, you go from 2008 where the Republican Party isn't able to find a Republican candidate for the U.S. Senate Mark Pryor is running for re-election, and he doesn't draw a major party opponent. To 2010, where you have people changing their names legally or trying to get Republican on the ballot for nonpartisan city races because the brand was so strong and so much aligned with most Arkansas voters and their values. And over that 2-year period, you have the election of President Obama, you have the Affordable Care Act, the sort of whiplash in that. And I think the biggest thing that gets overlooked, and I tried to give due credit in the book about, is you've got nationalized politics. So that narrative that the Democrats in Arkansas were different and were aligned with Arkansas voters in ways that the National Party couldn't be or wouldn't be was broken because that dialogue had changed so that the national issues trumped the state issues.
Yeah.
And I think that was a big part of it. The other one is the Republican Party, and you mentioned Doyle Webb as chair at the time. They worked to build a ground game, to fundraise, to draw their central committees and get counties enacted. And I think almost accidentally, by 2010, they had people coming out of the woodwork who were wanting to run. And they had already done all their homework, and all that ground game had been set up to where they didn't lose those opportunities. And so the story to me is not so much that the party had gains in 2010, but that they sustained those gains and actually have expanded them since then.
Yeah, I think there's two or three things that I just kind of throw out as observation. I'll get your take on that. First of all, that Bumpers Pryor Clinton triumvirate that you talked about there started to wane in influence. Mm-hmm. They were just moving off the scene. They weren't as around as much anymore. President Obama had a big cultural disconnect from the state of Arkansas. Race certainly probably played a factor into some of this as well. And then that national dialogue that you're talking about became much more dominant in that people, their politics weren't local anymore. Their politics became national because of the rise of, traditional, big media as well as social media. Kind of, am I summarizing kind of the big shifts that happened there that translated into those Republican gains?
I think so. And then having the Republican Party organizational structure, which doesn't get a lot of attention or credit. It's not very exciting to look at, but they were there to capture the moment and then exploit the moment.
Yeah. So when does the pendulum swing back? That's the question everybody asks now. I predict it's not going to be anytime soon, but what would you think as a political observer, political scientist would have to happen to see things change?
Well, if we were to look back at the 1970s, 1960s, we would see a Republican Party that numerically looked a lot like the Democrats do today. The problem is, during that era, there was a famed political scientist, pollster, Jim Rankino, who said at that time, Republicans can win when Democrats screw up, when they do something foolish, when they run for maybe a progressively ambitious House member runs for the Senate, loses in his primary, leaves a seat open, a Republican can get in. A Winthrop Rockefeller or Frank White could step into the state spotlight. Today, though, we would be misled. I think the brand of the Democratic Party that we've been discussing is it's perceived to be so out of step of the majority of Arkansas voters. And mind you, not many of us participate in elections in this state. Mm-hmm. So the relatively few of us that are making these decisions do not see any real connection with the Democratic Party. You sprinkle in what we call negative partisanship. We're voting more against somebody than for somebody. So I think it's worse for Democrats today than it was for Republicans in the 70s, maybe the 60s.
All right, where can you get the book if somebody wants to read Blue to Red?
Well, it's published by University of Arkansas Press. They've been wonderful people to work with. You can order it through their website. You can get it on Amazon. You can go to local bookshops. You can order it or purchase it about anywhere you could normally get a book.
I have not had a chance to read it yet, but I do plan on doing that. So
you're in there. You need to.
I know.
You need to
I probably do need to read. All right. Lastly, just a quick Pryor Center. You've got this. You're the new director of this right now. What do you got plans for? Are you going to do anything new?
So what we do is we collect and share and preserve Arkansas stories in the spirit of David Pryor and his love of Arkansas and Arkansans. So one thing we're going to continue to do are our long-form interviews, as you can find on our website. We're going to keep doing some project-based work, like the interviews I collected for this book. And we're also going to get out there and start celebrating and commemorating Arkansas festivals and traditions and getting stories behind those things.
Super. John Davis, always good to visit with you. Come back sometime soon, okay?
Be happy to. Thank you, Roby.
Thank you. We're back with more right after this.